All right, so before we get into the questions, and there are a lot of really good ones, and I have to end the show at around 8:15 because, as I said, I'm doing a Scott and Horton show. I just said that a minute ago. Did you not hear that? How did you forget that already? I'm going to try and get to as many as I can, but I just want to do this quick segment that we had planned for last night about people running to Saudi Arabia to pick up a bunch of cash, comedians, athletes, other celebrities, because it's often the source of all sorts of discourse and moral indignation. And I think it's really worth examining. So, as you probably know, about 2 weeks ago, there was a big controversy in this regard because some of the country's most famous and oddly wealthiest comedians, people like Kevin Hart and Louis C.K. and Bill Burr and Dave Chappelle, went to what was called the Riyadh Comedy Festival of 2025. And it was publicly disclosed that they all went. The bigger names got massive paychecks, talking about $1.5 million, $2 million just to go into a comedy show for an evening. And they were barred in their contracts from talking about the Saudi royal family or Saudi Arabia or Islam in any sort of a derogatory way. So they accepted pretty significant censorship to go to that country, accept a huge paycheck. And then some of them even came back, Bill Burr being the oddest example, and were just ranting and raving about how great Saudi Arabia was. That he was there like 72 hours. I guess he saw a Kentucky Fried Chicken. He was super impressed by that. And like he got off the plane and they didn't cut his head off. And he was like, wow, they're just like us. I mean, just really cheap and unsophisticated propaganda. It was kind of embarrassing. Like, if you're going to do that, go do it discreetly. Don't come back and start, heaping praise on the Saudis. It just makes you look really pathetic. We were going to talk about it then, but my decision to talk about this was prompted by the fact that right now there is a big tennis special in Riyadh, and it involves the world's top male tennis players, including Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic and Jannik Sinner, and it's called the Six Kings Slam. Basically features 6 of the top tennis players in the world. It's the second consecutive year that they have had this event. And each person who goes, each of these 6 tennis players is guaranteed a minimum of $1.5 million simply to appear. And it's a tournament, so they participate in an elimination tournament. Some of them go and play one match. In fact, half of them go and play one match and get eliminated immediately in a maybe 50-minute match, an hour match, and they make $1.5 million for that. And then whoever wins gets $6 million, which is a bigger payday than any other major tennis tournament, bigger than the US Open or Wimbledon. So you're talking about massive amounts of money, and they go just for a few days. It's obviously intended to whitewash or sports wash the crimes of Saudi Arabia. They're pouring huge amounts of money into entertainment and comedy and obviously sports as well. And every time this happens, there's all sorts of moral outrage. Here from Vox is just one example from October 10th. This is about the Riyadh Comedy Festival. Saudi Arabia's comedy festival is no laughing matter. No laughing matter, said Vox. Saudi Arabia's comedy festival is no laughing matter. Comedians went to Saudi Arabia and faced blowback in America. Early this month, comedians including Dave Chappelle, Kevin Hart, Pete Davidson, and Bill Burr flew to Saudi Arabia to perform there. The organizers claimed it was the largest comedy festival in the world, with over 50 international comedians performing stand-up, sketch, and improv. It was put on and paid for by the Saudi government as part of their effort to increase investment in the local economy and also to improve their global image. The Saudi regime's human rights record is why other performers such as Mark Macron, David Cross, and Atsuka Akatsuka have strongly criticized the comedians who attended. They have accused their peers of helping to, quote, put a fun face on Saudi Arabia's crimes against humanity. Tim Dillon, who originally accepted a deal to go and said he got paid $375,000 for doing so. I think he got half of that up front, about $170,000, something like that, $175,000. He then went on and made comments on his podcast before going, where he basically said, oh, yes, so they have slave labor and they, kill dissidents. I'm being paid to look the other way, and I'm willing to do that. And as a result, his contract was canceled, just to indicate how much censorship these people accepted in order to go in and do this. These people who are comedians and love to herald themselves as the frontline fighters for free speech accepted very heavy censorship provisions for a very large paycheck in Saudi Arabia. You know, you've kept people like Kevin Hart and Dave Chappelle worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and you'd question why this would be worth it to them. But in any event, apparently it was, and there was a lot of discourse created by that, and the same is now happening with this tennis tournament. Here BBC asks, what is the lucrative Six Kings Slam? And who is paying? And it says 5 of the world's top 10 men's players will compete at a lucrative exhibition in Saudi Arabia this week. There's a reported $4.5 million in prize money on offer, with some players also likely to have been paid 7-figure sums to appear. Reports say the winner could take home up to $6 million. That's what happened last year. The same group of people, with a couple of exceptions, went. Yannick Sinner won. He beat Carlos Alcaraz in the final. He got $6 million. I think Alcaraz got something like $4.5 million. These are people who make tens of millions of dollars a year as well. So there's always this kind of moral outrage in sports discourse right now and in the whole world of comedy. You know, how can you go and associate yourself with such a repressive, brutal, savage regime, one that represses women and kills dissidents and engages in essentially all kinds of deprivation of basic liberties, to say nothing of the violence and the wars and everything else for which Saudi Arabia is responsible. And it is true that Saudi Arabia is likely one of the worst regimes on the planet. And so when people, individual celebrities or athletes go, it creates all this sort of backlash. Here was a very popular TikTok video by Zach Woods, who's a pretty well-known comedic actor. I believe he was on The Office and a couple other shows. And this is very tongue-in-cheek, him purporting to defend these comedians who went to Saudi Arabia while obviously intending to harshly criticize them. Here's what he said.
Guys, it's that special time of year. It's the Riyadh Comedy Festival. And all of your favorite comedians are performing at the pleasure of Turki Al-Sheikh. And he is the head of the entertainment authority over there. And he has so many people thrown in prison because they tweeted stuff he didn't like about the soccer team or whatever, that there's a wing of a prison nicknamed after him where they hang people by their heels from the ceiling. Now, there's a lot of drips, killjoys, and dweebazoids who are saying, oh, they shouldn't do comedy over there because it's whitewashing a regime that just in June killed a journalist and killed Jamal Khashoggi and played a big role in 9/11. Shut up. Name one comedian who hasn't whored themselves out to a dictator. Sinbad in the 80s would go perform for dying Nazis hidden out in Argentina. Mr. Bean would do private shows for Idi Amin. Me and Bibi Netanyahu have collaborated. I pitched him a prank show called The West Bank, where it's hilarious. Like, people in masks show up and eject people from their homes, and they're terrified. They just traumatize these families, and then they can never come home. And it's been going on for years, but this season has been like action-packed. And it's a prank show, but there's also a true crime element because it violates international law and people have been killed a lot. Let's not get our, moral panties yanked up, wedged high in our rumps. Human Rights Watch has been begging the comedians not to participate in the whitewashing of the horrors that are ongoing in Saudi Arabia. Ugh, what a cockblock Human Rights Watch is for comedy. Let's have some fun, let's have some yucks, and let's not look too closely at anything. I'm a hypocrite too.
I think it's very well done. I think it's funny. But what bothers me about this discourse every time is this idea that somehow Saudi Arabia is supposed to be this place that's off limits, like a bridge too far for any Westerner. Like, you just don't associate yourself with a regime that dark and brutal and savage. And the reason why, and this happens all the time in the UK, I listen to a tennis podcast that's British, and they all, for the second year in a row, they all get on these sanctimonious high horses, and they're like, hey, if Saudi Arabia isn't the line for you, what line do you have? And, they get so carried away with their self-righteousness about it. And what drives me insane about this every time is that the reason there is a Saudi regime, the parties that are closest to the Saudi regime, that keep the Saudi regime in power, that give it the funds and the weapons and the technology that it needs and the surveillance instruments that it uses to track dissidents and punish them and kill them, the entities that do that most are called the British government and the United States government. Here from the official UK government site, February 5th, 2004, a key step for UK-Saudi defense relationship. Ministers progressed talks on a new strategic partnership during meetings at the World Defense Show in Riyadh. Quote, decades-long defense relationship between the UK and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is to deepen following bilateral meetings. Ministers agreed to continue working toward building a partnership to explore development of advanced new weapon systems, including precision-guided missiles and armored vehicles. Here from May of this year, from Al Jazeera, U.S. and Saudi Arabia agreed to a $142 billion weapons sale during Trump's visit. The White House has an agreement with Saudi Arabia, includes investments in weapons and technology totaling $600 billion. I could spend all night showing you partnerships between Saudi Arabia and the United States government, partnerships between the Saudis and the UK government, other Western governments as well. And it just strikes me as a very strange burden to place on like individual citizens or even just celebrities or athletes. You cannot go to this place because it is so evil. You cannot profit from there. While our governments have a very deep and long-standing multi-tiered relationship with the Saudi tyrants, with the Saudi dictators. They're among the closest allies we have. Trump was just there 3 months ago, along with Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, where he couldn't have been more explicit and genuine in the praise he was heaping on them as very close American allies. So if you're some British person or American person, you want to express this self-righteous anger that Louis C.K. or Dave Chappelle or Carlos Alcaraz or Novak Djokovic or whatever went to Saudi Arabia for 3 days and played tennis or told some jokes and got a bunch of money, I understand the argument. But when it's your government, not just with one party, not just with Trump or not just with the Tories, but the bipartisan policy of both governments for forever is to make sure the Saudi tyrants stay in place, to give them the money they need, the weapons they need, the technology they need, the surveillance instruments they need to stay in power all these decades, and to have very deep bilateral relationships with them where both sides profit. We sell them weapons, we take their money, they take our money. It just seemed like a very cheap way to express moral indignation. If you're really that upset about the Saudi tyrants, if you're really interested in having them isolated or weakened, you should be out protesting or demanding that your own government sever ties with them, not that Dave Chappelle or Carlos Alcaraz do so. I just think it's something that is so... The reason I thought it was worth discussing is because I think that all these people who understand that we are in bed with the Saudis or the worst, most savage regimes in the world and have been for decades, somehow block that out or compartmentalize it and just don't accept it or embrace it or acknowledge it, and instead deep down believe that we really are a country or a group of people in the West which abhors dictatorships, opposes it. And so how can these comedians or these golfers or these tennis players go to Saudi Arabia and take money from a regime that we hate so much? But we don't hate that regime. Our governments are the reason why they remain in power. And it's just this cognitive dissonance that lies at the heart of this discourse that always bothers me. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.